We've all seen horror movies about a group of friends who go on a little trip in the middle of nowhere. Maybe it's a ski resort, or an island of some kind, or, most likely, some sort of cabin in the woods. So imagine my surprise when I come across one of these movies, literally titled The Cabin in the Woods, about, well, you get the idea. Except The Cabin in the Woods is very unlike any other movie of this genre. While you're usually screaming at the TV telling the character to not do something, this movie gives an explanation as to why these characters always end up making stupid decisions. You see, horror movies have come full circle. We have parody movies about every kind of horror movie known to man. No matter who you are, you always kinda understand where the plot and where the story is going, what's gonna happen, the stereotypical characters, and who usually dies first. But by 2012, the formula these movies followed was incredibly stale. And horror movies have made a bit of a resurgence these past couple years. There's all the A24 movies that have the same vibe that creeps you out, but if I'm being honest, is already starting to get a little bit stale. And things like Jordan Peele's movies, which lure you in with a bit of comedy, only to have a scene that will absolutely traumatize you and make you sleep with the lights on all summer. But before all these, back in the early 2010s, all horror movies were one of two things: a found footage movie or just really, really bad. Most of the times, both. Enter The Cabin in the Woods, which was at all times a parody, incredibly original, and very entertaining. While you might think that you've seen a movie or two like this before, there's truly nothing like The Cabin in the Woods. So grab your weaponized bong, travel to the desolate woods with your stereotypical group of friends, and let's choose our own death in The Cabin in the Woods. So if you're walking into this movie not knowing anything about the film, the opening scene is a little strange. This movie doesn't seem like a movie titled The Cabin in the Woods. In fact, maybe I'm just watching the wrong movie? Okay, never mind. But then we're introduced to the gang of college students, each of them more stereotypical than the next. We have the sweet, nice girl, who is usually the last one to survive in movies like this. The, how do I put this? Good-looking blonde girl. The brainless jock, the conspiracy theory stoner who hates the government, and the nice guy who usually falls for the sweet and innocent girl and sacrifices himself for her. They hop in an RV and hit the road, only to come upon a creepy old gas station paired with a creepy old owner. They continue towards the cabin that Kurt's cousin just bought, but something is clearly off about the road in. We also get some more insight into this strange office storyline, but still no indication as to how all of this is actually gonna connect. While on the surface, everything we've seen so far with the group of friends seems very typical of countless other horror movies, there are a few things in this introduction that make the story stand out. Now, the trailer for this movie does tell you that this movie isn't like the rest of the movies that you've seen, but it doesn't really show you how or why that is. For example, Dr. Doback isn't in the trailer at all.
That's right, Mr. Doback.
Call me Robert.
That's right, Robin.
Robert.
Yet he's also part of the opening scene, and we see that he's also in communication with some guy who was on the roof tailing the college kids, so we're aware that there's some sort of plan in motion that the college kids aren't aware of. But upon a second watch, a lot of the dialogue in the underground portion makes more sense. But trying to view this like it was my first time watching it, you're still pretty lost at this point in the movie. The creepy gas station guy does his job by spewing out exposition, saying that people are always looking for where that cabin in the woods is, and how getting there isn't a problem, but getting back is. And the biggest piece of evidence that something weird is going on is when the bird flies right into some invisible force field. Kinda strange, but let's keep going. The gang gets settled in the cabin, and Holden wants to take down some creepy Severance-style picture where he finds a one-way see-through mirror. He thinks about it for a moment, but this is the stereotypical good guy, he can't do that. So he alerts the crew and offers to switch rooms, where he then decides to undress himself. Clever, I see what you're doing there, pal. But then we pull back and we see that everybody is being watched by Dr. Doback and the whole underground crew. They're in league with the creepy gas station guy, who begins spewing a villain monologue just for everybody to start laughing at him.
I'm still on speakerphone, aren't I?
The gang goes swimming and has some fun before we cut back to the office workers who are betting on some sort of game. There's a new guy down there who clearly isn't comfortable with all this, but they explain a few things about how the college kids have to come to this cabin of their own free will, ignore the harbinger of death at the gas station, and go to the basement of the cabin where their fates will be decided of their own accord. So a game of truth or dare breaks out. Jules makes out with a moose.
That moose over there.
That's clearly a wolf.
And the basement door blasts open. With every horror movie of this genre comes the characters making stupid decisions, and this movie gives an excellent reason for why every stupid decision is made in the first place. They explain that there's something in the hair dye to make Jules the dumb blonde, so she does things that freak out even everybody who already knows her. We also learn a bit later that they pump some sort of gas into the cabin that changes the decision making of everyone. But we see this a bit sooner when Kurt says that the wind must have blasted the door open. This is obviously a very dumb horror movie type of response, and even Marty knows that something is up with that. In the offices, we get a bit more insight into everything, but we're still not totally sure what they're talking about, or more importantly, why they're doing everything. But they do say that the people upstairs don't care about their betting as long as everything goes according to plan. They say that they can rig the situation as much as possible, like the door to the basement being blasted open, but then it's up to them to choose, which is exactly what happens next. In the basement, there's a ton of strange objects and artifacts, everyone mindlessly picking them up and starts playing around with them, until Dana calls everyone over to the journal that she found. She starts reading the entries of a young girl telling gruesome stories about her family, and it creeps everyone out, but nonetheless, she continues reading. Marty starts hearing whispers of some voice telling her to continue reading, so he tries to stop her, but Kurt says, whatever, it's harmless, just keep on going. So she does exactly that, and the zombie redneck torture family springs to life out of the ground. We cut to the office, where we find out that this is exactly what they were all betting on, and that maintenance and the intern guessed this correctly, so they win the pot. We then see the board of all the possibilities, and there's, the typical werewolf, vampire, zombies, clowns, but then there's also some different ones like witches, different from the sexy witches right under it, and also Kevin. Hadley is a little aggravated because he wanted there to be a merman, but at least the Buckner family has a 100% clearance rate. They seem to have some sort of feud with Japan, who also always has a 100% clearance rate, and then we see that this, or stuff exactly like this, is happening all over the world. The picture is becoming a bit clearer, but we still don't know why all of this is happening. They do talk about the remnants of the old world, and how nightmares come from these stories, not the other way around like Truman initially says. But let's go back to this board, because it has some cool Easter eggs to other movies like Deadites and Angry Molesting Tree, two things clearly inspired from Evil Dead, which makes you think that maybe Evil Dead has some sort of secret underground office crew watching them as well. There's also Twins, which is a reference to The Shining, some non-horror movie references like the Sugar Plum Fairy, and I also love how Sasquatch, Wendigo, and Yeti are all under the same category for some reason. But perhaps even more interesting than the board is the glimpse we see into what's happening at Japan in some sort of school classroom, and we get glimpses of some other places too from all around the world, each of these a reference to another different horror movie. And all of this is still leading us to the question, why? Marty talks with Dana and says that something is up here because Jules is acting way dumber than usual, and Kurt is now some sort of dumb jock, even though he's on full academic scholarship. But Dana dismisses him, and we see Jules and Kurt run off into the woods, all of the office workers waiting for their classic horror movie moment that involves blondes, but she says that the mood isn't quite right, so the office does everything they can to get her in the mood. Literally, with a bit of pheromone mist, raising the temperature and the light, getting the show that they need to keep whatever they serve happy. And then, the Buckners come in. They kill Jules, and we see that the office workers aren't entirely heartless, and they begin praying to some sort of entity before pulling a lever which unleashes a vial of blood that's going somewhere. Marty continues hearing the voices and goes for a walk, interrupting a moment between Dana and Holden in the process, and just as one of the Buckners is about to approach him, Kurt runs in and clotheslines her, telling everyone that Jules is dead, and then the Buckners come in swinging. But Kurt insists that they stay together and go room to room to make sure everything is barred off. This bothers the workers, but then they pump some more mist into the cabin and Kurt changes his mind, saying that maybe they should split up after all. They run into their own separate rooms and the doors lock behind them, and Marty ends up finding a camera. Before the office takes drastic measures, Judah Buckner comes to the rescue and snatches Marty from the window, who thinks that he's on some sort of reality TV show, and another lever is pulled. Holden and Dana use the mirror to reunite, and then they head in the basement, the same basement from the Buckner journal where Dana thinks that they're gonna die. But after the Buckner family continues their assault, Dana fights back and kills one of the zombies. But she can't continue being armed, so they press a button and zap the knife out of her hand. Kurt comes to the rescue, and they all escape the cabin, leaving behind Jules and Marty, who have both been claimed by the Buckners. This is really the part of the movie that shows how clever this plot really is. Whenever the characters are making good decisions, the office has to step in and make sure that they don't continue doing that. Kurt says that no matter what, they all have to stick together. It's something that you never really hear in a horror movie because it's smart, so with the push of a few buttons, that decision is changed. Dana successfully fends off an attack, and the smart thing to do would be for everybody to grab some sort of weapon that's in that basement, but with the click of a few buttons, that decision is changed. While these types of horror movies are usually infuriating to watch because the characters make all these dumb decisions, you can't really be mad here because that's literally what they're trying to do. The characters are trying to make good choices, but they're being forced to do otherwise, which is a great piece of commentary on the horror genre in general, and makes each scene that much more entertaining to see how the office is going to interfere next. We see that Japan has now failed their attempt to please the ancients for the first time ever, as have all the other countries. It's now solely up to America to get this job done. And that's an issue because the rest of the group is headed to leave and the tunnel is completely fine even though it was supposed to have collapsed hours ago. There's a race on both ends and the tunnel ultimately does end up collapsing. There's a small gap between them and the other side, so Kurt gets on his dirt bike to cross the gap, promising to come back with cops and choppers and really large guns to take out the rest of the zombies, and as he makes the jump, it seems that he's gonna make it until he hits that same force field from earlier and falls into the abyss below. Dana realizes that Marty's crazy, stoned ramblings were correct and that there's puppeteers controlling what happens. They try to think of a plan to go forward, but then the Buckners continue their attack, and the RV goes off the road and into the water. The office starts celebrating, saying that the Virgin doesn't actually have to die, she can be the final girl, she just has to suffer in the process. Hadley starts getting a little bit sentimental, saying that he's actually rooting for her, but then quickly stops in his tracks. Everyone starts celebrating their accomplishments as the screen in the background shows Dana getting horribly beaten, but then the phone rings and everybody goes silent because apparently not everyone died according to plan. Just as Dana is about ready to be done in, Marty comes in and saves her, brings her into a small underground room which has an elevator in it. They start going down, and then sideways, where they encounter a werewolf, and then a ghost. And then we pull back and see all of the different monsters that could have attacked them had they chosen a different artifact other than the Buckner's journal. I really like the scene of them going to escape only for the tunnel to still be intact. While it seems like the office workers have everything under control and they're just doomed from the start, this gives the audience a tiny bit of hope that maybe they'll be able to escape if they can just get out in time, only to lose that hope when the tunnel does come crashing down. But then Kurt actually has a semi-solid plan, and it doesn't seem like the office is affecting this scene at all, and if there was no interference, he probably would have escaped, but just as we saw earlier, this was not an option of escape, and it's not like Dana or Holden would have made it if they stayed in the RV, since the Buckner was already in there waiting for them. But the office scenes are all really great, across the whole movie. They add a great bit of levity and comedy to everything, while also not treating the situation they're dealing with like a joke. It's just clearly not their first time they're doing this, so they aren't as stressed out like the new guy Truman is. Truman is kind of the audience's view into this world, This is very clearly his first time on the job, so he doesn't want to partake in the betting pool, and he's also kind of disgusted by the way everybody acts and talks about what's happening. Now, the scene showing all the different boxes of monsters is probably the most iconic shot of the movie. There's again some more references to other movies and properties, like The Witch from Left 4 Dead. And I almost guarantee that if this movie was made today, there would be some sort of cheap cameo involving like Jason or Chucky or some sort of monster that the audience is familiar with as a way of trying to tie together some new cinematic universe or multiverse. But this was made in 2012. So this is a very self-contained story with only references. There's no need for cameos, so this movie doesn't have them. We can put two and two together and see that other movies with characters who do stupid things might have some sort of office betting pool going against them. And if you watch other horror movies with that lens, especially the bad ones, it actually makes them way more enjoyable. The office workers freak out, saying that Marty needs to be killed before the girl or the whole plan is foiled. They take down a security officer and walk through the facility, a voice over the loudspeaker telling them that there's something much bigger at stake here and they need to let them finish the job. So an army of armed guards comes in to take them out, but Dana unleashes the army of monsters on them, where we get what is probably the second most iconic shot of the movie, the elevators opening and the horde of monsters being unleashed. This whole entire next sequence is incredibly fun, seeing all the different monsters running around the facility that a few hours earlier people were celebrating their victory in. It's incredibly satisfying to watch because all of these people, besides Truman, didn't really have any problem killing the others. Hadley finally gets to see a merman up close, and just as Dr. Doback goes to get away, Dana takes him out, and he begs her to kill Marty before it's too late. They continue running along the corridor when they find the offering chamber. And then Sigourney Weaver comes out of nowhere and explains everything. How the ancients require a ritual sacrifice of stereotypical people to keep their slumber. Ripley tries to convince her to kill Marty so that way the world can continue being at peace, because if he survives, the whole world suffers. Dana holds up the gun to Marty, but is attacked by a werewolf before she can pull the trigger. Marty and Ripley fight for a moment before little girl Buckner comes in and saves them, and the two of them wait it out before the ancients rise up and the movie ends. I mean, this entire third act is a lot of fun. It's great to see all the different monsters that we could have seen but didn't in action, and it makes you wonder how different things could have gone if any number of these other creatures had been in charge instead of the Buckner family. We still never got to see Kevin, so that's a shame, but we did get to see a number of other things from the board instead. Now, the whole movie really leads up to this final confrontation, and I think that the ending itself is just okay. Like, I don't really blame Dana for pointing the gun at Marty. I mean, it's your friend or the fate of the entire world, and it's not like you, as the final girl, are gonna go on and live a happy life after all this. You're probably not even gonna make it out of this alive anyways. Might as well save the rest of the world. And Sigourney Weaver coming in at the last minute is, again, a little strange. Now, they do talk about the people upstairs quite a bit in this movie, but we know very little about these people upstairs, and what does that even mean? Because the people upstairs are technically the people at the cabin. I think that this was just a cool way to get a big actor in a cameo, which was exactly the plan, because the other actors they had in mind were Bruce Campbell and Jamie Lee Curtis. But they ultimately got Sigourney Weaver to sign on for a day, so they added this character in. But I ultimately think it causes more questions about everything than it gives answers. And I'm all for questions at the end of the movie. I think it makes the story live on longer, but this just feels weird to me, especially with how the movie ended. I feel like there were a lot of ways to do this ending to spawn future sequels, like having it be ambiguous as to whether or not Dana kills Marty, but then cut to another year later and have a new group of college students run into the Harbinger. There were so many different ways to do it, but I actually respect that they went with the definitive closed ending, so that way there wouldn't be a sequel. Naturally, this movie did pretty well at the box office, and it's kind of gained a cult reputation over the years, so talks of a sequel have continued in the years that followed, because really with a story like The Cabin in the Woods, there's endless possibilities with all the different rituals in other countries and all the different monsters. This could have been prequel heaven, or even like sequel heaven when it comes to horror movies, if the ending was just a little bit different. But it seems pretty unlikely that a sequel will ever come from this because, as director Drew Goddard says, I haven't had the idea that makes me go, oh, we have to drop everything and do that now. So will we have a sequel filled with cameos of other popular film franchises? Possibly, but as of right now, there's nothing planned. I still think that The Cabin in the Woods is such a unique horror movie. The commentary it has on horror movies in general and the fun ways they play around with it makes this movie really satisfying to watch unfold. And the entire third act makes rewatching the film that much more enjoyable, so that way you can try and catch some new monster or reference that you didn't catch last time. Overall, I'm going to give The Cabin in the Woods an 8.5 out of 10. What are your thoughts on The Cabin in the Woods? Let me know down in the comments below, and let me know what movie you want to see me do next. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave it a like and subscribe for more stuff like this. Special thanks to my channel members, you guys are the best, and I will see you all in the next one.
Yeah.